Thanks, Helen. Now, I have to touch on the other aspects of Hexagon, people and culture. From a people perspective, if you think about how their job is designed, they're not incentivized to share knowledge. So at the very basic level, at the individual level, people aren't prioritized. And that scales up. 100 people who aren't incentivized to share knowledge create a culture wherein no one is incentivized to share knowledge.
Yeah. But that's really interesting, because the work that I've been doing with them has looked at the networks that people have. So looking at who do I share knowledge with. So if you imagine lots of dots on a page with lines between the dots that speak to each other or that share with each other, what you find, you can plot that as like an overall network of connections. And what I found in my research is that if you've got, you tend to find that the leadership or people that speak to each other develop very similar attitudes to each other. So if I'm a leader and I have another relationship with another leader and we both think that knowledge sharing is really important, then actually the people in our close network, and they may be subordinates at different levels, they tend to also prioritise quite highly knowledge sharing. But outside in that periphery of the network, so people that don't necessarily see knowledge sharing as important, you find that their connections also don't see knowledge sharing as important. And so the job of the organisation is to try and get that message diffused to that wider group of people, if you see what I mean. And that's where I think the culture comes in. So people need that the idea that this needs to change across the whole of the network. So how do they do that? Well, my research shows that you need to have that you need to sort of incentivize this attitude and place a high priority on knowledge sharing at the highest level, or at least the most influential level. So if you do some sort of network analysis, for instance, and you find that there are really central people in the network, not necessarily the leadership, but those people who are seemingly really influential in the network, it's really important to convince them that knowledge sharing is important. Because if they're influential in the network and they're the go-to person everyone really likes, if they value knowledge sharing, then that message goes out. But it's no good just being at the top of the chain and shouting about it and not doing anything about it yourself. So for instance, if you're the leader and you say, right, knowledge sharing is really important, then you need to be the one putting in place those. And so when it comes to your promotion, you need to be sharing knowledge. If you're the leader and you're seen to be promoting people who don't share knowledge, then that undermines the process and that undermines the culture.
So that's really helpful. When you're starting to think about outcomes, what do we actually do? You've mentioned getting those key influencers on board, people who have a huge amount of connections and influence the culture disproportionately.
Yeah.
You need them to be engaged in the new way of working.
Yeah.
And you also need to be changing those goals.
Yeah.
And incentives at the individual level.
Yeah, but also at the group level. I think you need to be setting not just performance metrics that are bound by individuals, but if you're setting group level objectives, you need group level metrics. That's actually quite hard to achieve, but you need group level metrics. You need group level metrics. I think you need to be thinking about the influence of the workspace that people work in and thinking about how to design a workspace that facilitates knowledge sharing. I think you need to be thinking fundamentally about the messages that your bureaucracy, if you like, sends out about knowledge sharing, if that's the case. And think about the role of culture. I think you need to be thinking about how to prioritising the design of technologies that facilitate knowledge sharing and actually have sort of knowledge management as a fundamental strategic objective in your organisation. And for me, one of the big things that I'm involved in is the design of jobs. So not just thinking about, right, we need a new person whose responsibilities will be A, B, C and D, but thinking we need a new person whose responsibilities would be around these. How will their job affect other people's jobs? And looking at the design of jobs as a socio-technical system.
Thank you.